Hello everyone, Richard Tubb here with Pub Talk, where I talk business with IT professionals in the traditional British way, with a pint. And I'm here with Andy Platts today of Jireh Solutions. How are you doing, Andy?
I'm doing great, thank you, Richard.
Cool, cool. And we're at the Royal Oak Freehouse in Tetbury, a beautiful part of the world near the Cotswolds. And I'm drinking a pint of Freedom Lager. What have you got there, Andy?
I have a pint of Tom Long.
Tom Long, so we'll enjoy that as the conversation goes along, but let's get started. So Andy, tell me a little bit more about your business and where you come from.
So Jireh Solutions started in 2006. Originally I've been a partnership and we formed a limited company then, looking to expand, specific, very business focused, and for the first 4 years probably, it was essentially me and a bunch of associates. And that gave us, we saw good growth, good client retention, break-fix model, and particularly very dependent upon me. And in looking to expand the business further, it wasn't a sustainable model. So 2.5 years ago, that was when we made a step change. We got an investor who is engaged with us and basically enable us to then look at expanding the business, take people on. So with in-house resource, it really gave us a platform then to expand further and make it less focused around me.
Okay. So when was the business founded?
2006.
2006, and you said so you grew from a one-man band, moved things forward. How many members of staff within the business now?
There's 6 of us.
6, and how's that broken down between technical and administrative?
So technical basically is 5. It's a family business. My wife does all the accounts, bookkeeping, office management. My son is also one of the members of staff who's just actually off to university, so he's been sort of doing weekends, evenings, so we'll be losing him in September, but everyone else, we're essentially technically focused, and realistically we'll be looking to take somebody else on to replace the whole deal later on this year.
Well, congratulations on the growth to date, and I'm sure that will continue. What would you say, Andy, is the biggest challenge that you found over the past 2.5 years with growing the business?
For me, I think time is such a challenge. You must hear this every time.
Oh, you and every other MSP in the land, yeah.
I think, interestingly, in roles that I've had before, I don't have a problem with delegating. And I think actually in having taken on staff and hopefully using them well, that's something that has worked well, but it doesn't change the fact that there's still certain elements, particularly as we have been growing very well, that just means there's more of it to do. So trying to find that balance, and it's time on the strategic stuff. So dealing with developing the business on the journey that I feel we've been on really since we looked at expansion from break-fix to managed services. There's strategic steps, strategic decisions, tools that we need to take on board to evolve and change to help us work more effectively, and that's where that's not small chunks of time. And whilst I'm engaging our current staff in that as well, we're busy and it takes their time as well. So time.
Time's the biggest challenge. So there's going to be plenty of IT professionals and MSP business owners watching this video, Andy, and they're going to say, yeah, that rings a bell. We know we need to make time for strategic thinking. We know we need to make time to plan where we're going to go forward. How did you make that time? How did you carve out that time in your day-to-day?
I think a number of significant things. I've always been very conscious that we've been on a journey, so it's something that I have put a priority on. I've taken the time out to engage with a wider sphere of our business. So whether that's been going to a variety of trade-orientated events, and that's anything from tier conferences, Snacks and partners, so going to their events, also vendor-run events, Tech Data, Ingram. So giving exposure, going to, vendors are running something specific that I can see is relevant. And I recognise by taking the time out to actually go to those, blocks the time out in a way that if I try and make it in the office, it's a lot more challenging. If I need to do focused work, whether I go to the home office to do it or close the door, is not as effective as being somewhere else actually. And you get the interaction as well. So I think that's been the driver, and then coming off the back of that is then to try and either myself or with members of staff to actually do the work that needs to back it up. So if we're looking at a new tool that can help move us forward in a way that's useful, it's not a case of, oh, there it is, go with it. We need to actually play with it, make sure it does what it says it will do, make sure that it's going to then work for our customers, roll it out for ourselves typically, if it's a tool for our customers rather than one for us, or a service for our customers. So that can slow things down, but I think I'd rather make the right move, make the move once, rather than have to roll back and then do it again. I think most people actually would be more frustrated about having to redo something if they had the choice, rather than do it slowly and right the first time than rush it and then redo it.
I'd absolutely agree, yeah. So what does a typical client look like for your business?
The typical client that would reflect the ones that we have a good engagement with would be maybe between half a dozen and 2 dozen computer using staff, and they might have no server and be entirely cloud based, or they might have one or two servers, but that would be, if you like, the core in the middle of our client base. But we deal with sole traders and we deal with enterprises. So we did quite a large job for a multinational company earlier this year, which was a hybrid AFS deployment for 365, 1,500 seats. So we do deal with quite a wide cross-section, and we have hundreds of customers, but the core in the middle that occupies most of our time, when we have the tightest ongoing engagement, rather than say project work or hear from them once a year, sits in that sort of half dozen to 2 dozen.
So going back to something interesting you said about that time you took out to do some strategic thinking about the business and plan where you wanted the business to go. You mentioned tools. So which tools do you use within your business at the moment, and how did you come to the decision to use them?
So when it was just me and a bunch of associates, then essentially everything was very much driven by me at my request. So as long as I understood what was going on, that was fine. So a combination of spreadsheets and using Outlook and tasks and a few other things meant that I could manage, I could bill, everything worked fine. Not sustainable once you start taking other people and you actually want them to get on with stuff when you're not around.
Sure.
Doesn't work. So I think the key one, without a shadow of a doubt, which was the big major decision that everything else essentially is founded on, was Autotask.
Right.
So the professional services automation PSA tool was one that needed to be able to work across the board. So whether it was invoicing, knowledge base, ticketing, and it does more that we're only skimming the surface with right now, but I'm very aware of the other facilities that we want to be able to tap into, whether it's things like the web or being able to use a CRM for using email. All of those things are things that we want to add to, but that gave us the foundation. So it meant then, as we recruited, I could delegate tasks, leave people to get on, be able to actually get the reporting back to see what was going on. Invoicing can be literally a couple of clicks. It depends. Maybe I create more work than I should. I don't tend to do it just with a couple of clicks, because I like to check the invoices before they go out. I would rather be confident that the customer is going to be happy with what they see, rather than save time up front and then have to deal with unhappy people and say, what about this? Just being able to check through it first.
Were you noticing any issues with invoicing beforehand? Did you spend more time on it and things?
It was a long manual process.
That's a common thing, yeah.
So we use Sage for our accounts. We've not yet hooked in somewhere on Instant at the moment. We're not on line 50, so we're not feeding information back in, and that's something we have in mind that we are likely to do. At the moment, it has been a useful sanity check with my wife actually going through those. But I think actually the number of problems that get picked up there probably one every quarter at the most.
Right.
So actually there's a good call to automate that, I think, because we've got that off the pat now.
Yes, yeah.
But yes, the process we were using was quite labour intensive before, whereas now actually it is streamlined. And that's very important to us. You know, it can waste a lot of time. And I think one of the justifications for going down the Autotask route was actually, if we miss out on the opportunity of invoicing something because you don't record it correctly, actually it pays for itself. If you miss an hour a month, it's paid for your subscription.
Yeah.
So it still requires all staff members to make sure they record stuff properly, but the tools and the system are in place in such a way that it lends itself to it, so that you work in a methodical way, in a way that maybe is easier to not do without.
Yeah, and we keep coming back, you mentioned it a few times during the conversation, scalable. You know, it's not scalable, it's not sustainable if you didn't have this type of tool in place. There's going to be a lot of people watching this video today, perhaps in not a dissimilar situation to you with your business, Andy, you know, 6 people or thereabouts. They're going to be saying, well, we've got a Helpdesk application, perhaps that we've built ourselves, or we use SharePoint or something along those lines. What would you say is the difference between a Helpdesk application, in other words, just the ticketing, and what you now know of a PSA, professional services automation tool like Autotask? And why did you choose to use that?
So, a few elements in there. I think one of the key things in the choice was, from my perspective, it seemed to be the most widely supported and recognised, and that's supported in a number of different ways. So, also, one of the key elements to help us grow was then actually working smarter with things like our RMM tools, remote manager and management tools. So having integration of that into the PSA is important, because again that will save you work, whether it's feeding in configuration items from the integration at that level, or in terms of automation of the ticketing, so that you can feed information in and out seamlessly, opening and closing tickets. That kind of thing, again, is working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
So I think that was key. But the other thing in terms of visibility, so of tickets, and you know, we've set up a system now to make sure that tickets don't stay open without them getting attention. So you can do all sorts of things in terms of whether you want to notify your customer or whether you want to actually then send out surveys. There's a lot of power in that automation that helps you work smarter with it. But from my point of view, I think that visibility, both at the point of, oh, you know, how do I get on with that ticket today? I don't have to distract him, I can just read the content on the ticket. I can see the ticket as a whole, so I can see the history of what's gone on. And then when it comes to invoicing, again, it gives me clarity. And the number of choices in there, whilst we're on that journey to manage services, it allows you to run stuff either as a project or under managed contract or break fix. So it enables you to scale not just in terms of number of people, but in terms of the journey that your business is on, or the type of contracts that you want to manage at that time with a particular customer. It's not you do that or you do that. You've got the full range. And because it's all comes into one package, it kind of works and operates seamlessly between them. If you end up with a ticketing system, you'll end up with, you know, one system does that, another that. And whether you're never going to achieve the same kind of tight integration that you can across that whole piece with Autotask. You know, it doesn't do the RMM stuff, but it integrates really well with it. And you know, you can feed out into your accounts package as well, which is something we're looking at. So those kind of things are important. Again, it was strategic, seeing that it would allow us to take us on that journey, but then have to change again.
Yes, yeah, makes a lot of sense. Now, earlier on you alluded to the fact, a common problem with MSP business owners, that you perhaps didn't have as much time as you would like to do all the things that you wanted. Implementing a PSA tool, I think a lot of people are put off because they see it as a significant investment of time, and they're right, but perhaps they think, oh, I don't have the time to do this. What made you realise that actually for your business you wanted to implement a PSA tool sooner rather than later?
I think a number of things. Interestingly, I made the decision to go for a tool knowing that we were going to be expanding the business, and I wanted to actually make sure we had that in place before we recruited the first staff member. So, we've been working with associates up until that point, and that was fine, but I wanted the system to be in place. And when I say the system, I mean actually the way of working. So the tool and the way of working, pretty much hand in hand. But what I didn't want to do is say, do this now and then we'll change to something in the future.
Sure.
So the timing and the driver for it was absolutely the growth of the business. Which means that as we've recruited each new member, this is the tool set we use, this is how we work. And it's not to say that it doesn't need to be reinforced and kept on, but then again, you've got the visibility to be able to see that. You know if people are working with working with the system the way that you want and giving information you want, because the visibility is there. And then you can act on it if it's not. So the driver was to expand the business without a shadow of a doubt, and the timing was to make sure we had it in place first, so we set the pattern and the course right from the outset.
And what impact did it have in the first weeks after you implemented the BSA tool?
Interesting, the learning. So I had to get my head around it. I couldn't delegate that. I didn't have anybody at that stage.
Yep.
And actually, the transition was quite smooth. To get the basics up and running didn't seem that hard. I thought it was going to be, but it actually didn't seem that hard. We could, we were able to export stuff from a number of our current sources to import into there, things like contacts and accounts and those kind of things. So that was all quite smooth. We didn't try and bring in any historical data. There wasn't any particular value in that. What we needed to get in, basically the accounts, the contacts, so that we could then move from that point forward.
Did you keep your older ticketing system or something just there for archival purposes then?
Yeah, so I had the old information, and a lot of stuff was dealt with on email, and that stuff's still available. But without a shadow of a doubt, if I want to find something, being able to find it in AutoTask is 10 times easier than going back to the old way of doing things. And that's with 5 or 6 of us working on it now, rather than just me.
Yeah.
So certainly, I don't look back with any regret. It was the right move to make, and I argue it's a brave one. It's interesting. You talk to some people, and their perception as to whether something is expensive or cheap is very much a subjective thing. And from my perspective, I think the time I gain, the visibility I gain, and the professionalism with which it allows us to deal with our customers and their issues means that it is worth every penny. And whilst obviously staff is our biggest outgoing every month, the tools that we use are such a key part of what we do. We don't make the decision lightly, but I'm confident it was the right decision and it's worth every penny.
Wonderful. So, we've talked about all the good stuff that's come out of using the BSA tool. There are challenges though. What would you say is the biggest challenge of implementing AutoTask for you?
I think maybe it's more to do with the journey that we're on as a business rather than the tool itself. So I recognise that there's parts of the tool that we're not using that we want to, and it comes back to time again and actually making sure that we've got the time to get out into it. And some of these things will end up being delegated, probably rather than doing myself, because they're parts of the tool that I'll probably get the guys to engage with maybe a bit more than I will. But I think that's probably going to be the challenge, is finding the right way of resourcing those additional changes. So I'm conscious, right now we want to use it to work with projects more, and that's not simply touched yet. So I need to make a little bit of time to that, and I'm thinking I need to do that before I end of our financial year, because that's it makes a nice clean point at which will then give us actually a better visibility. So if we're looking at wanting to work out a managed service, what's cost effective for a customer we're already dealing with, as opposed to a new customer. If you take on a new customer, you don't have a lot to go on, quite frankly. If it's an existing customer, you have history. And by changing how we work with AutoTask, so if we then put all the project work into projects rather than as we do at the moment, it tends to get recorded as time and materials, then we've got a very quick visibility as to how much they're they're taking their time to support them as opposed to do project work to develop them.
Yes.
Which then gives us the numbers to say, well, we can see what it's costing, and that can give us a very good indication what we should be charging them. We don't, at the moment, we don't have that separation.
Yeah, I've heard some people refer to it as making decisions based on metrics rather than gut feeling.
Yes, and yeah, that's going to be really key, and we haven't done it. And I did want to do it, but earlier this year didn't have the time, and I'm kicking myself because it would have put us in a much better place now than we are. But hey, there are only so many hours in a day.
There are, and you said it's freed up time for your business to do other things that you needed to do anyway. So.
Yeah, and we're doing other strategic stuff as well, and we're taking on. So we can't stand still in other areas. I'd like to think that we're thought leaders in our area with some of our. We work with a number of local businesses who also work in the same areas as us, where it's not uncommon for us to be a resource for them.
Yeah.
And that's good. We work in a very collaborative and cooperative manner. And hopefully that's to the benefit of everybody concerned, which is great. So it does mean not just getting tied up navel-gazing on our internal processes, but also making sure we're delivering the solutions that our customers want and then also sharing them as well.
Yeah, which is ultimately what it's all about, which is where the money has to be made. So
yes, yeah, you're right.
So I'm intrigued by something you said earlier on, that you were making the transition and you were doing a mixture of break-fix work and ad hoc work, project work, and managed service under contract work and things. What was that like when you moved across to a PSA tool? What was the experience before and after? Did it make things easier or more difficult?
I think it would be fair to say probably before we took on auto tasks there would have been little, if anything, that really would have constituted a managed service.
Okay.
So it was the tool gave us the facility to do that. And just simple things like being able to set up a contract so that it gets billed automatically, whether it's a small fee annually or a more significant fee monthly, depends on what the service was. But what you don't, with a manual-based invoicing system, essentially you've got to remember to do it.
Yes.
And you then have to cross-reference stuff and trying to pull the stuff out and make sure you get it right. Well, that's a complete nightmare. And of course, money's walking out the door if you don't invoice people for stuff that they're getting.
Yeah.
Which is mad. So being able to set up your contract, so if we're contracting in a third-party service for somebody, they're invoicing us. Again, that's suicide if you're not billing that on. So that just you can sleep at night when you've got that in place. So whether it's for an antivirus service or a value-add CRM, there's a number of different things that we're invoicing people for regularly as a service that is managed to varying degrees, and we weren't doing that before we had all the tasks. We are now. It works well, and those kind of recurring revenues have a great value for the customer because they're great products, and they actually not have to sweat over it when it comes to invoicing means that it's going to pay its way.
So you've almost gone on to the journey, the transition to become a managed service provider at the same time that you implemented the PSA tool, basically. Yeah,
totally.
And I'm intrigued as well. You mentioned their services and understanding, if I understand correctly, what you said, profitability of services.
Yeah,
that's really important and something that lots of MSPs overlook. They buy a service in, they sell it on to a client, but then there's time that goes into supporting that solution. There's the time that you spend account managing with the vendor and things. So did using the PSA tool give you greater insight into those solutions and what profitability you were making from them?
It's given us some. I think it's fair to say we could probably get more information out of it than we are. And I am, with the kind of things that we're doing at the moment, it is giving us that visibility, but I think the scale with which we're doing it and the things that we are doing it with, it is relatively clear-cut for us right now. I think the next step, which will enhance what we can offer rather than it being quite segmented into being more of an overall package for customers, then without the visibility that we believe we'll get with auto tasks, to be able to see the profitability of when you go down that road.
Sure.
Because that's absolutely key. We can see the kind of impact that our current contracts have and how much time we're putting into them. And I say they're not a big part of what we do time or money wise, but what we're to be full-blown MSP, it's going to be the big chunk of what we do, and if they're not profitable, then it's commercial suicide.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the visibility, how do you know whether they're profitable or not? So where it's been kind of, shall we say, useful or interesting, it becomes actually business critical.
Yes, yeah. And it is interesting, actually. I speak with a lot of IT companies who I work with one-on-one, and as a business, they are profitable. But going back to something that you said about understanding the profitability of individual clients, you know, the business can be profitable, but there could be one customer who is costing a business hundreds or thousands of pounds or dollars, and it's hidden away because they're making profit elsewhere in the business. So that visibility into the profitability of contracts, that's very important, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think it's interesting that it's not uncommon, maybe it's overworked, but, you know, statements that turnover is vanity, profit is sanity.
Yeah.
Knowing where your profit is coming, absolutely key. And I think, interesting, we work with a lot of charities, not-for-profits, and that's very much at the core of what we do. So, whilst on the one hand, if you read the accepted wisdom is that actually the most profitable businesses in our sector are pure play MSPs. And I don't see us ever going down that route, because we have 400 or 500 clients, and a lot of them we have quite a loose engagement with, and we're quite happy with that, and I don't see us losing that. And it's not that I don't think we're particularly cross-subsidising, particularly. We make more or less profit off different contracts, that's fine, different customers that we deal with, but I think I see part of what we do as being a service, and a raison d'etre though. The reason why we trade, we need to make a living out of it, but we also want to help people.
Yes.
So from that perspective, only doing stuff that's most profitable isn't likely to ever be the case. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean that we might not have a more pointed discussion with customers where it's not working for us. And I think one of the things I've always maintained is, for a relationship, business or otherwise, to be enduring, it has to work for both parties. So finding a way where both the provider and the recipient feel that it's commercially and technically a good solution for them is absolutely key. And from our perspective, we need the visibility to do that.
Yeah, the number of MSPs I've spoken to where they find, after using a PSA tool, that they've got unprofitable clients, and they find it really difficult to have a conversation with the client and say, well, what do I say to them? Well, going back to what you just said, it does need to work for both parties. So going back to them and saying, unfortunately, this is not profitable for us. We're going to have to change things, or we're going to have to go our separate directions. Yeah.
I think if they like what you do,
yeah,
actually it shouldn't be that hard a conversation. It doesn't mean it's an easy conversation, but at the end of the day, if you've been doing a good job, then they'll be interested to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I'm looking forward to being able to do in a different setting with going fully managed service is the strategic stuff, which at the moment they pay for on a consultancy basis, and some of them maybe, they want to keep their bills small, so they don't want to pay for it, so they don't get it, and that's not great for them. We've got this year we've been engaging quite a lot of government schemes to provide that into businesses fully funded, which is fantastic for them, and they'll recognise that a number of other businesses can benefit. And that value add, if that's rolled into your contract that you offer them, it again shows and adds the value that in the relationship. So if you're then having a discussion about cost and profitability and whether it's sustainable or not, if you're bringing extra value to that relationship, I think it's more likely to receive a warm reception.
Yes, yeah, makes a lot of sense. So I think you've already shared a great deal of value and insight into your business, Andy. Really appreciate that. What's the next stage for your business? Where are you going to go next?
I think the next big thing for us is looking at what we're doing with our RMM tool, or tools as we have right now. We're using a couple of them. Historical reason when we started, it was a conscious decision, mainly driven by economics at the start, but to move on and particularly to work smarter, better integration, or get a single right point of integration with Autotask, but also that whole working smarter piece that makes the MSP thing work. I think we need to be on a single platform, and it's evaluating the other players in the market as well as our own that we have some experience with already to decide which one we actually then will centre on and roll out and use, hopefully, much near its full extent. I think that's the next big thing. Probably, we're doing the evaluation right now. We're actually, tools that we don't use, we're trialling, and tools we are use, we're stretching, and we should be able to come to a decision on that probably in the next month or so, and then obviously there'll be a little pain in change probably, or development on that, but that's the next big thing.
But whichever tool you choose, presumably you're going to make sure that it integrates with your PSA tool of choice, Autotask.
You're not going to happen without it. Not going to happen without it. Take that as read. Yeah.
Cool, cool. Well, thanks again for all the information you shared. Really appreciate it. Now, there's going to be a number of IT companies watching this who have got value from what you've shared. What advice would you give them to say for the wider IT industry? What changes do you see coming down? What challenges do you think other IT business owners like you need to face and overcome in the next couple of years?
I think the big thing is how they deal with the cloud. So a number of IT companies get the cloud, and it's a big part of what they do, and it's certainly a big part of what we do, and it's been a big part of driving our growth over the last 2.5 years. But certainly not universal. And actually, it plays to our advantage right now. If a business owner has their incumbent IT supplier says, "Oh, you need a new server, 2003 is going out to support next year, it's going to be X thousand pounds," and we've had people come to us and say, "Well, can't we do something in the cloud?" And the answer is, yeah, of course you can, and it's going to cost you, it's really, and even migrating isn't that big a cost. And you get more durability, you get more scalability, all of those sort of good things, and there's rich pickings out there if you're with it. But it doesn't, on-prem isn't dead, whether you're small, medium or large, and it's finding the right solution for the customer. So on-prem, cloud, hybrid, virtualized, not virtualized, being across all of those platforms and technologies to provide the best and most cost-effective solution for the customer, rather than you must do this. Or, it's just as bad saying you must go in the cloud come what may as to say you mustn't. It's actually making sure that it's matched up for the customer's needs. Sitting there and saying we can't make a living out of it isn't the right answer. If it's right for your customer, you need to find a way.
Yeah. Because if you don't offer the solution to them, somebody else will.
Exactly. No two ways about it.
Well, thanks again for your time today, Andy. Really appreciate it. It's been a fascinating insight into your business, and in a beautiful part of the world, it's got to be said. If you're going to be an MSP, Tetbury in South Gloucestershire is a wonderful place to do business. So really appreciate it. Thanks for your time today.
Cheers.
And if anybody wants to find you online, whereabouts would they find you?
Our website or email probably more easily as contact form on the website, but Jireh Solutions, that's spelled JIREH solutions.co.uk, Andy at. The website is not SEO'd, it's a brochure website. All of our business is word of mouth, and we're growing at a good pace off the back of that. So we don't find it's particularly, the disconnected business that comes through the website is hard work to close. Stuff that's referred to us, is great, it's easy, and the customers just want to know when can you start. So I'm on LinkedIn as well. I'm afraid I don't do any other social stuff.
Well, fair enough, not everybody can, and I think there's probably a whole different conversation we can have about websites, isn't there? Maybe we'll do that with a pint next time.
Sounds good.
So thanks again for joining me, and thank you for joining me for this pub talk. Now, if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about the beautiful Royal Oak Freehouse that we're at, I'm going to be speaking to Sebastian about that just next, and I hope you will join me at some point again in the future for another pub talk. Thank you.
Great. So I'm Sebastian, I'm the General Manager here at the Royal Oak in Tetbury. We reopened the pub in sort of mid-August last year, 2013. I came on board in mid-July. The pub was built in 1781. It was originally an old coaching tavern, and for the past sort of few hundred years it's been a real sort of community hub, if you like. About 10 years ago it was bought out by a pub co and kind of went into the ground a bit, and then it closed just over 2 years ago. More like 3 years ago actually, for about 18 months, and then it was bought privately by our lovely owners, Kate and Chris, who renovated the whole place and made it into what it is today, which is again a thriving community hub. We specialise in doing fantastic food, but sort of no nonsense, great British pub grub. which is affordable as well. It's all locally sourced, organic where possible. We cater for lots of different dietary requirements, celiacs, vegans, vegetarians, all sorts. And as well as that, and then so the forefront of our business, as well as all the food, is the drinks offers that we do. We like to offer very high quality drinks, whether it be spirits, wines, lagers, etc. But the kind of main focus of it is we are a pub, and what's pub about? It's about drinking really good beer. So we do incredible beers. We have lots of local brews on. We've got 5 draft ale pumps, and they have 3 of them are sort of static. They're always the same ones. The Tom Long, we have the Bath Gem, we also have the Moor Norhop, which is actually an unfined ale, which in England most beer is fined. There's findings in the barrel which are a derivative of fish, basically. They help beer to settle and make sure the beer's not cloudy. Moor Brewery doesn't use that in their beer, so we actually have a vegetarian and vegan friendly beer on at all times. And then we have 2 ever-changing guest beers. Then we get from local breweries and sort of slightly further afield as well, up as far as sort of Yorkshire, like Leeds and Manchester as well, and further down south, Cornwall. So we do lots of really nice drinks to complement our fantastic food. We actually have 6 bedrooms here as well, so we let those out all year round. We are open all year round. And yeah, kind of what we're about is just having fun. We've got a great ethos, we've got fantastic staff here. It's always a warm welcome, and yeah,
fantastic. And if anybody wants to find you online, Sebastian, whereabouts would they find details?
So the website is www.theroyaloaktepbury.co.uk. Just go straight on there, you can find out all about what we do. It's got pages on our events as well. It has a link to our Facebook site. And if you wanted to book a room, if you go to the top of the screen, homepage of the website, there's a little button saying book your stay here. Click that button, take you straight through to the website, and you can check availability or book a room as well if you want to. But most of our stuff gets updated on the website and on Facebook as well. And we do lots of events all year round, and they generally tend to be a little bit bonkers, but good fun.
Fantastic, thank you, Sebastian.